It was a bright Friday afternoon when my estranged nephew, Darren, showed up at my door with a suitcase in hand and a smile that instantly brightened my day. I had always adored Darren. He was a kind, intelligent young man, and over the years our bond had grown deeper than just a family relationship. I welcomed him into my home, and his laughter filled the silence of my house as he settled in for the weekend. But this time there was something unusual about his visit. It felt like some weight had been placed on his shoulders. We sat down in the living room, the air filled with the aroma of the coffee I had brewed for us. Darren started talking, and I listened, trying not to give away the sudden, awkward clenching of my heart when he started talking about her, Stephanie, the woman he was dating. She was older, 15 years older to be exact. He told me he was thinking of proposing to her. I swallowed hard, my heart racing, but I forced myself to stay calm. I wanted Darren to be happy, I really did. But the thought of him being with Stephanie, of him committing himself to someone else, gnawed at me like a dull ache. He was too young to be trapped in a commitment with someone who seemed to already control most of his life. Maybe if I dared to admit it to myself, there was something deeper than anxiety, a hint of jealousy, a longing I tried to push away but couldn't. "Are you sure she's right for you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual and not wanting to seem intrusive. Darren looked at me, his eyes widening, and I realized he hadn't expected my question. She makes me happy, Aunt Liv," he said, but his voice shook, unsure. "You're only 20, Darren," I said, reaching out to gently take his hand. "You have so much time ahead of you. Don't you think it's best not to rush things? Stephanie may be a wonderful woman, but you deserve to explore life, to figure out what you really want." He lowered his gaze, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of his soul wanted to protect her, but the other part seemed relieved by my words. Over time, during his visits, I found myself saying little things to gently talk him out of the idea of marriage. Not a direct condemnation, I would never overreact, but little nudges that made him think twice. Maybe it was selfish of me, but I wanted him to realize that he didn't need to rush into anything, especially with someone who seemed to be pulling him away from the rest of his life, from his family, from me. And gradually, Darren changed. He started talking less about Stephanie and more about his other dreams. He started sharing stories with me in the evenings, laughing until he cried, and sometimes, as the night drew to a close, lingering a little longer, sitting next to me on the couch. Our bond grew deeper and deeper, and I could see him looking at me, differently now, softer, as if he was beginning to see me not just as an aunt, but as someone who mattered deeply to him, someone he trusted with the tenderest parts of his heart. I wasn't immune to this change either. The more Darren stayed with me, the more I wanted these moments to last forever. I could feel the warmth of his gaze on me and the way he always reached for my hand, as if wanting to reassure himself that I was there for him. I knew I shouldn't do that this was dangerous territory, but the part of me that loved him, always had, grew stronger, more desperate for what we could have. I remember one particular evening vividly. We were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, the sky colored in shades of orange and pink. Darren was silent, and I could tell he was deep in thought. After a long silence, he turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "Aunt Liv, have you ever wondered what life might be like if things were different?" he asked, his voice a barely audible whisper. My heart raced and I felt my breath catch in my throat. "What do you mean, Darren?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I mean, if we weren't just aunt and nephew, if we could be something more," he said, keeping his gaze on me. His words hung in the air between us, and I felt a rush of emotions, fear, excitement, hope. I wanted to tell him that I'd thought about it, that I'd imagined a life where we could be together, free from the constraints of our family bonds. But I couldn't bring myself to say it. Instead, I reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. "Life is complicated, Darren," I said softly. "But one thing I know for sure is that I care about you more than anything else in the world." He smiled, a sad, understanding smile, and I realized he felt the same way. Over the next few weeks, Darren's visits became more frequent. He would find any excuse to drop in on us, even if it was just a cup of tea or a short conversation. Every time he left, I felt empty, but at the same time I was looking forward to the next time I saw him. We would sit together for hours, talking about everything and nothing, our conversations ranging from childhood memories to dreams of the future. The more we talked, the more I felt my resolve weakening and my longing for him growing stronger every day. But Stephanie didn't disappear quietly. One night I woke up to strange noises, scraping on the windows, the sound of something being moved outside. It happened again the next night and the night after that. Darren thought it was just animals, but something about it didn't feel right. Then one night I caught it. Stephanie was standing in the backyard, crouched low by the shed, her face contorted with anger as she tried to open the lock. "Stephanie," I called out, shock and rage mixed in my voice. She raised her head, her eyes widened. There was some manic desperation in them. "He's mine, Liv," she hissed. "You're only his aunt. You can't keep him from me." My heart pounded in my chest. The truth was revealed to me, her jealousy, her possessiveness. She somehow knew Darren was slipping away from her, and she resorted to this strange, cruel act to scare me, to destroy what Darren and I had built together. I stepped forward, my voice firm as I spoke. "You have to leave, Stephanie. You're not welcome here." She glared at me, but I stood my ground. Finally, she turned and walked away, her figure swallowed up by the dark night. I watched her until she was gone, and my heart felt heavy, but at the same time filled with a strange sense of relief. When I got back to the house, Darren was already waiting for me, concern written all over his face. I told him everything, and as I spoke I could see the realization dawning on him of who she really was and who I was to him. That night Darren took my hand and pressed it to his chest, his eyes searching mine. "Aunt Liv, I think I've known for a long time," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It's you. It's always been you." My heart raced, the emotions I'd kept locked away bursting to the surface. I reached out and gently touched his cheek. "Darren," I muttered, unable to find the words. He leaned closer, and for the first time, I let myself feel it all, the love, the fear, the hope that maybe we could have something real. The next few days were filled with emotion. Darren and I spent more and more time together, and I felt as if some barrier between us had disappeared. We talked openly about our feelings, about the future, and what it had to offer us. There were moments of doubt, of fear. We both realized how complicated it was, how others might perceive us. But there was also an undeniable sense of rightness, a sense that we were exactly where we should be. One evening as we sat in the living room, Darren turned to me, his eyes full of determination. "I want to be with you, Aunt Liv. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I've never felt this way about anyone before," he said, his voice flat. I felt tears come to my eyes, and I reached for him, pulling him into a hug. "I want this too, Darren," I whispered, my voice trailing off. "But we have to be careful. We have to take things one step at a time." He nodded, and I could see the understanding in his eyes. He was willing to wait, to be patient for us. We hugged each other for a long time, the warmth of his body pressed against mine, the quiet realization that we had both found our way to each other, against all odds. And while I knew the road ahead would be difficult, I also knew that we could walk it together. The love we shared was something rare, something worth fighting for, and looking into Darren's eyes, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them side by side, with love and courage in our hearts. Days turned into weeks, and we grew more and more comfortable with each other. Darren would come over after work, and we'd cook dinner together, our movements in the kitchen synchronized so naturally, as if we'd been doing it for years. There were nights when we'd sit by the fire, wrapped in blankets, and share stories about our lives and dreams. I could see him looking at me with a mixture of admiration and love that made my heart sink. One day, Darren suggested we go traveling together. Just the two of us, he said, his eyes shining with delight. We could go to the coast, find a little house somewhere, and be just the two of us, with no strangers. The idea thrilled me, but also terrified me at the same time. It would be the first time we would really allow ourselves to be together without pretense, without secrecy. But I could see how much it meant to him, and I wanted it too. We planned the trip carefully, choosing a secluded place where we could be alone, away from prying eyes. When we finally hit the road, the air between us was filled with anticipation. The drive was beautiful, winding roads, took us through dense forests and breathtaking coastal scenery. Darren held my hand, running his thumb over my skin, and I felt a peacefulness I hadn't felt in years. The cabin was perfect, small and cozy, nestled in the woods overlooking the ocean. We spent our days exploring the neighborhood, walking on the beach, and our nights spent in each other's arms with the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. It was like a dream, a perfect escape from the complexities of our daily lives. One night, as we sat on the porch and the stars scattered above us, Darren turned to me and said seriously, "I love you, Aunt Liv," he said, his voice full of emotion. "I want us to be together no matter what. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to face whatever comes our way if it means I'll be with you." Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him, my heart overflowing with love. "I love you too, Darren," I whispered, "more than I ever thought possible. We'll find a way, together." And in that moment, I realized that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would meet them hand in hand, and we would be accompanied by courage and love at every turn. The future was uncertain, but as long as we had each other, I knew we could overcome anything.